So the next component is the persistent volume, and API version, kind, and metadata are the same. Then you have specifications. In specifications, we start with capacity, and capacity actually mentions the storage size that this persistent volume will contain. So here I am saying that the moment I create this persistent volume, it will have a storage of 5 GB. Then you have volume mode, and volume mode can be either file system or block. File system is the default, by the way. And when we mention volume mode to be file system, then it is mounted into the pod into a directory. And if we use the volume mode to be block, then this volume would be presented into the pod as a block device. So the application inside of the pod will have to format the device and create a file system out of it. So these are the two ways to do it. One is file system and the other one is block. Then we have access modes, which is pretty important. There can be three types of access modes. One is read write once, then read only many, and read write many. Read write once mentions that the volume can be mounted as read write by a single node only, not multiple nodes. Read only many specifies that the volume can be mounted as read only by many nodes. That means this volume can be mounted in multiple nodes. And read write many is used to mount a volume as read write by many nodes. And most of the time that would be the option that we mention, because we can have multiple worker nodes and we do not know where our application pods would land unless we use node selector or node affinity. So it's always a better option to use read write many unless you have specific reasons or you have mentioned specific node selectors or node affinities with the volume and the application as well. Then you have persistent volume reclaim. So there can be three options. One is recycle, the other one is retain, and the third option is delete. What it says is that if we delete this persistent volume and we mention retain, then the underlying storage device or the underlying storage service like AWS EBS, Azure Disk, or Google Cloud Engine Persistent Disk will not delete the storage that is provisioned by the cloud service provider. That's what retain says. Delete means that the associate storage component or associate storage service or the associate virtual storage will be deleted by either AWS EBS or GCPD or Azure Disk. Recycle is actually removing everything in the particular device. Now this is only valid for NFS or host path. So let us go ahead and change it to retain because we want to use this persistent volume file with the cloud service provider. And then finally we have storage class name, which says K8s storage SC that you created earlier. That means that this persistent volume would be managed by K8s storage SC storage class. So I told you that storage class needs cloud service provider to manage persistent volumes, and we do not have one. So what will happen if we create this persistent volume? Let us go ahead and see that. So I'll use this file to create our persistent volume. Let us go ahead and create the persistent volume. Now it says that it requires a value. You should always mention a volume type. This error is coming because as this persistent volume is being managed by a storage class, we have to mention a volume type, which we have not done. So that means that we do not have to create this persistent volume if you are using storage class, as that will be dynamically provisioned when you use a persistent volume claim. But we have not provisioned any cloud service provider. So let us create a persistent volume that is not managed by a storage class. And the file would look like something like this. Very less options here. The kind is similar, persistent volume. Metadata is same, capacity is same, access modes, read write once or read write many. So I can mention read write many, and we have to mention host path here. And the host path that I'm saying is /app/data. That means remember that if you create this persistent volume using this, I have to make sure that all the worker nodes have this path available. And notice that the storage class name is manual here. That means this persistent volume will not be managed by any storage class. We have to manage it manually. So this is what we are going to use right now because we do not have any cloud service provider associated with our cluster, or we do not have any cloud service provider plugin. Now if I try to create this persistent volume, it will be created without any problem because we are managing it by ourselves and without the help of any storage class. kubectl get pv will fetch you the information about the persistent volume. It says that capacity is 5 GB, access modes have read write many, reclaim policy is retained, status is available. We'll get the same information for namespace prod and any other namespace for that matter because the persistent volume is not scoped or limited to a particular namespace. If I describe, we'll get all the information. Name is this one. The storage class is manual. That is important because that's what we have done. We are managing this persistent volume manually without using any storage class. But one thing that I have told you that we have this path /app/data and it is of type host path. And we have to make sure that this path is available in all the worker nodes. Currently, I have only one worker node. So I'll have to make sure that this path is there in that worker node. And this is my worker node, k8s worker. And I have this path created apps-data. And this path is also associated with an additional device or an EBS volume, which is /dev/xvdf. You need to know EBS a little bit to understand how this thing works. But anyway, I will not discuss EBS here. What I'm trying to say is that I have attached an additional EBS volume with this EC2 instance. And then I have mounted this path /apps/data to this EBS volume. So this path has been manually created by me and it was needed because I had mentioned host path in the persistent volume. So if you have, let's say, 5 worker nodes, you have to make sure that this path is available in all the worker nodes and is backed by some volume or the other. In this case, I have backed this file system /apps/data with an EBS volume that is attached to this AWS EC2 instance.